Hey guys, how's it going? It's Travis Mortz with the Forest Hill Film Lab. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about photo books. If you're anything like me, you probably like all things photography related, so I do too, and I collect photo books myself. I got a couple shelves full of them, so I figured instead of just talking about a specific photographer, I would, bring out one of their books, talk about the book, and then kind of use that as my segue to also talk a little bit about history. Because I personally draw a lot of my inspiration from the master photographers of the past, because they're truly the ones who had to figure it out first, and they're really the masters that pave the way for all of us. So instead of trying to, get online and just kind of figure out new things, I really like to look back at all the things that have already been done and see if I could do anything to recreate that. For instance, when I go to Yosemite, I try to shoot 4x5 as if Ansel Adams might have, just because it's a little bit more challenging and makes me feel really, whole inside when I do something like that. It's very motivating and inspiring to try to do something like the greats already have. So basically, I wanted to talk to you guys about some of these photo books and why these photographers, inspire me a lot. So we're going to get started here, and we will start with, one of the most famous books ever, The Americans. This is Robert Frank's book, The Americans. So we will get started with this. So for those of you guys who aren't familiar with Robert Frank, he's a documentary photographer who he shoots a lot of street photography. That's what he specializes in. And back in the 50s, he got a grant from the Guggenheim to go on a photography journey to document. It was a personal project of his that he wanted to create and do a show or a book or whatnot. And he was going to travel across the country and document Americans, the American way of living, the American life for anybody where they're located. So, he's going to go to Reno, Nevada, he's going to go to Oklahoma, he's going to go to South Carolina, and he is documenting just everyday life. But the thing about the Americans that's really special for me is I already drew a lot of inspiration from Robert Frank being a street photographer, but I was lucky enough to actually get to see the Americans in person. When I was in Sweden the first time, we went to Fotografiska Photo Museum, and when I got there, I saw it said Robert Frank outside, and the date was all jumbled up because it was European, so they put the day of the month first, and then they put the month, and then they put the year. So I thought that I missed the show, that I was going to be going to see something else, and when I went inside this gallery, all of Robert Frank's work was on the wall, and including a huge collection from the American series, actual prints by Robert Frank, signed by Robert Frank. And to be in Sweden, Stockholm, Sweden, of all places, and see this, it lit a fire inside of me. I literally went outside and just started shooting street photography. Something about it inspired me in such a way that I've been chomping at that ever since. Ever since that day, I realized, holy shit, just seeing these images at a specific time in my life changed things for me, and I really felt that. And ever since then, I can still remember that moment when I left that gallery and it was lightly raining outside, and I just started taking pictures of people walking and looking for shadows and reflections and nothing else. So The Americans. The reason this book is so important is because it's a really good representation of a body of work. A lot of these images don't have much context outside of this book. They don't have a lot of, I wouldn't say they don't have strength, but the book gives them a story that they're trying to tell. So here, I actually tagged some of my favorites so I could give you guys some examples. So Robert Frank traveled 48 states of the country, obviously the lower 48, and he just shot all kinds of things. So here's the first example I chose. This is in Charleston, South Carolina, and these pictures were taken in 1955 to 1956. So Charleston, North Carolina. This is an African American nanny with a very pale white baby, and it's just it's just real life. It's very real, and that's what Robert Frank was great at capturing. Was You know, this was South Carolina, and I don't know much about South Carolina in the 50s, but this photo tells me something about it, and now I feel like I know something about it. It's telling me a story. And realistically, all this book was just photographs of people in everyday life. You know, this is in Ranch Market, Hollywood. This is just a girl working in Hollywood. It's not all it's cracked up to be. You know, here's a mom just, you know, it's probably a hot day outside. Let's see. Butte, Montana. They're just sitting in the car, and he's just capturing everyday life. But because he's got this assignment, because he's got this capsule of a project, all of these images make sense. All of these images are part of a larger body of work that, as a whole, we know now is one of the greatest collections of street photography to have ever existed. The Americans is it is street photography. If you want to know what street photography is, you buy this book and you go look at it. Street photography is shooting whatever the hell you're looking at. Street photography is the second you feel an urge to take a picture, you take it. And that's Robert Frank. That's what Robert Frank's style is. He didn't ask this guy's permission. He shot it because he felt like shooting it, and he dealt with the consequences later. This guy might have not liked that. He might have caught him. He might have not caught him. Who knows? It doesn't matter. Robert Frank was in the moment, and he captured that moment, and that's what this book is all about. Just capturing moments in time to put together for a greater body of work that tells a complete story. And what's the story that he told? America. What a story. I mean, he basically just told us the story of America by doing what? Just taking pictures of us. He just took pictures of normal people. This one doesn't even have anything in it. This just kind of gives us a place in time. We get to feel like we're there. This was a restaurant on Highway 1 in South Carolina. I mean, it's just so interesting that this photo, if I just posted this on Instagram today, it would not hold a lot of weight for anybody, but because it's part of this greater body of work, it has so much meaning. Look at this is an assembly line in Detroit. That's so telling. That is Detroit. He captured Detroit in one photo. That is being a photojournalist. That is photography right there. The fact that he could go to Detroit, take one picture, and leave. Now, this is not the only photo from Detroit in the book, but it could be. So, I mean, this book is just a great representation of photojournalism and what you could do with it, and also not to be scared of photographing things that nothing, if you will, photographing nothing. I included this one in here because at this Swedish show, it had more than Robert Frank's America's work. It had all of his work. It had multiple bodies of work from different times of his life. And one of the things that Robert Frank did in his life is he traveled to, I want to be sure here, I think it's France, but it could be Italy. You know, I'm not referencing it right now. I don't have this paperwork, but I believe it was Italy. And when he was there, nope, it was Paris, France. Okay, sorry guys. Definitely Paris. It just came to me. So he was in Paris, and he went there for an assignment, and nothing was inspiring him. Nothing was really striking him to be, you know, what he was looking for. So what he started doing is he started photographing chairs outside of different cafes. He noticed that in Paris, there's so many different types of chairs, so many different cafes, and he just started photographing chairs. And he created a body of work out of chairs. And look here he is in the Americans, still photographing chairs. These chairs caught his eye and he photographed them, and now they're part of this body of work. And because of that, because of Robert Frank photographing chairs in Paris decades and decades ago, when I see chairs, I look at that shit differently. Because Robert Frank, if Robert Frank could make a body of work out of chairs, then goddamn it, I'm going to do my best to make at least one good image of some chairs. So there's my my take on Robert Frank. He is the ultimate street photographer. He is the ultimate fly on the wall. The introduction of this book was written by Jack Kerouac, which was a good friend of Robert Frank's and knew him well. And I just want to read the first sentence to you guys, just so you can kind of get a real feeling of this book. And then we're going to move on to the next book. And Jack Kerouac was a little sloppy writer, so this sentence is kind of long, which is nice. That crazy feeling in America when the sun is hot on the streets and music comes out of the jukebox or from a nearby funeral. That's what Robert Frank has captured in tremendous photographs taken as he traveled on the road around practically 48 states in an old used car, in parentheses, on Guggenheim Fellowship. And with the agility, mystery, genius, sadness, and strange secrecy of a shadow, photographed scenes that have never been seen before on film. That is what Robert Frank did. He photographed scenes that have never been seen before on film. This is the title. This is the cover of the book, and it's so telling. It's a bus. I think this was also taken in the South somewhere. I think South Carolina. He spent some time there, and we've got some white people in the front, and then we've got African American people in the back, and this photograph captured an era, and it captured the Americans. This is us. This is America. And Robert Frank captured it all in one book. And if you look at this book today, it's still us. This is still America. He did it so good that decades later, it doesn't even need to be replaced. It's still true. So that book is really, really awesome. Obviously, we all know about this book, and those of you who don't know about it now. So there's that. I want to move on to the next book. Ansel Adams in Color. Let's see here. So this book is Ansel Adams in Color. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we all know a lot about Ansel Adams. I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about the greatest photographer of all time too much. But the reason I want to talk to you guys about this book is because in my last video I mentioned how you should be looking at the world in tones of gray. And that's obviously what Ansel Adams did. He was world-renowned black and white photographer. He mastered the zone system. He was the greatest. But the thing is that he did also shoot some color. Now the reason that Ansel Adams didn't shoot a lot of color is because he was not satisfied with the fact that his color positives, his Kodachromes, could never be accurately transferred into a print of the same quality. So he didn't really like the loss of quality in between negative and printmaking, and he also didn't like the fact that the positives he was shooting Kodachrome, the positives weren't, he couldn't duplicate them in all of their glory. So although he did shoot color, he didn't shoot a lot of color, only about 3,500 images in his career, which for some of us, we shoot that many at a wedding, so that's really awesome. And anyways, what this book shows you is that by using the same techniques in which you would use to shoot black and white film, and by just seeing the light, the results are going to be equally spectacular on color film. And also I just wanted to show you guys some of Ansel Adams' color work because a lot of people might not know that he shot color. And of course he did, but he even admitted himself that he wasn't the greatest at it. He didn't really care for it, and he also felt like he didn't understand it the same way he did black and white film. But here I wanted to show you some of his images. I mean, this was taken in 1953, so it shows you just how timeless color photography is, and it also shows you that once again, all of the craziest photos that you've seen nowadays have already been made by some of the masters, and it's just our best. We try to do our best to go out there and make something new, but these photos exist in 8x10 slides and things like that. Just quality that we're not even trying to reproduce anymore, which is the reason why we're never going to reach the excellence of Ansel Adams, because I feel like a lot of people nowadays don't really have the motivation or the need to. But Ansel Adams was out there. He wanted to try shooting color because it was something new. He said that he went out and bought some color plates when he was young, in the 20s. He bought some color plates and learned how to develop them on his own, and that was kind of his introduction to color. And then Kodachrome came out, and he really did enjoy shooting Kodachrome when it was appropriate. Here's a famous tree in Yosemite. Let's see here. There's another photo. And, I think that color photography there's plenty of benefits to shooting in color, and some of these photos I wanted to show you illustrated that. This last photo I thought was pretty neat because in the back of this book there's a bunch of notes talking about just letters from Ansel Adams kind of referencing his color photography. And this photo in particular, he wrote a letter to Beaumont Newhall. And for those of you guys who don't know who Beaumont Newhall is, he is the photography historian of the one. He wrote The History of Photography, the book to have, and he also wrote a lot of books about the F-64, and Nancy Newhall is also huge in that the Newhalls were close friends with the F-64 group and with Ansel. So anyways, that's a little backstory. So this photo, when Ansel took it, he wrote a letter to Beaumont, and I just wanted to read that to you guys before we move on to the next book because I thought it was really funny. So he said in 1946, he said to Beaumont and Nancy Newhall, he sent them a letter, and he said, "Got some gorgeous color things on the trip. One ectochrome at Zion Park is the G-damnedest son of a bitchin' wonderful thing I ever did. With a 26-inch lens, just a detail of brilliant colored cliff. Wow." And so you can see that, even Ansel Adams would get excited about images. He wasn't always expecting greatness. He knew that, sometimes it's not going to work out. A photographer I met, which actually gave me this next book, I'll use that in a segue. Here, so that's Ansel Adams in color. Such a great book. Such a great book. Okay, so this next book has to do with Yosemite as well. This book, George Fisk, Yosemite photographer. This book was given to me by an old photo teacher. I found him. He was like an old man. He gave me my enlarger and a bunch of other stuff. But he gave me this book. And on the inside, his buddy said, "Happy birthday. This was in 1980. P.S. At least somebody took the views we talk about." And I didn't really know anything about this book. He gave me all of his old photo stuff, old photo books and whatnot. And I was talking to him about Ansel Adams being the greatest, and he explained to me, he broke it down to me really, really awesome. And he said, Ansel Adams was a great photographer. And he said, but he wasn't necessarily the greatest. He's like, he just chose to show us his greatest images. He's like, just like you or me, Ansel Adams has taken tens and thousands of images, and a lot of them have been bad, and of course some of them are going to be good. That's how it goes. But basically, this photographer who I was getting these books from told me that, your who you are as a photographer is dictated by the work you decide to show people. So if Ansel Adams only shows us bangers, if we see a book of 200 amazing images, how many images did it take Ansel to actually accumulate 200? Did he shoot 20,000 first? So what dictates a great photographer? Is it the amount of good images you take, or your decision-making process in which good images you share? Or how does it all work? I don't know. It got me thinking. But either way, it's making me talk about the person who gave me this book. This book, it's about George Fisk. George Fisk was born in 1835. So he was born in 1835, which was 4 years before the invention of photography. Photography was invented in 1839. So this guy was alive before photography was alive. And he spent the 1870s and so on living in Yosemite Valley. And he actually photographed Yosemite long before Ansel Adams even arrived. Ansel Adams showed up in the 20s, and when Ansel Adams arrived as a Yosemite resident, he was actually printing George Fisk's negatives in the Yosemite darkroom or what have you, whatever the photo studio would have been there. There was one. And Ansel actually came to Yosemite, and he was working with Fisk's negatives, and he was printing Fisk's photos for Yosemite, for tourism and things. And that just amazes me. It amazes me that, even before Ansel Adams did not by any means discover Yosemite. He was the guy who was hired to highlight it for the world, but it was already photographed. It was already shared with the world, and George Fisk was the first one to do it. So I wanted to read to you guys the reason we don't know about George Fisk is because a lot of his photos were lost in a fire. So I kind of wanted to just shed some light on him because I was really amazed by the fact that this guy who was alive when photography was invented actually made his way out to Yosemite. I mean, he made it to Yosemite before cars were even invented. This guy was dedicated. He was about his craft, and his only motivation was to document the valley, and that's like the true passion. Today we can't even have the same amount of passion that photographers must have in the back in the day. We can't even match it. We're not even limited in our lives enough to have to. So I think that's really awesome. Let's see. George Fisk, Yosemite's first resident photographer, receives long overdue attention in this well-illustrated volume. Fisk assumes a much-deserved prominence in 19th century Western photography with the publication of this collection. Ansel Adams has called Fisk a top interpretive photographer and has said, "I really can't get excited at Watkins and Muybridge. I do get excited at Fisk." So this is a photographer that Ansel Adams actually idolized for his work in Yosemite, and it just goes to show you that even before the greatest of great photographers, there was someone who had already done it and done it on plates and done it in their own way. And I mean, he was there before anybody was there. He was in Yosemite before Yosemite was a tourist attraction. He was in Yosemite when it was just badass dudes that had a hike in there. And, you know, all of these views, these have all been shot before. These have all been documented. And this guy was going up the 4-mile trail in Yosemite on a donkey with tons of gear. And he actually traveled with Edward Muybridge, who is the photographer who invented like stop action photography. He is the photographer who discovered that a horse actually leaves the ground with all 4 of its legs at one time. He was hired by Stanford and I believe Yale or Harvard, another Ivy League school. And he was hired by them to photograph a horse running to see if it actually leaves the ground all the way when it runs. And he developed a camera to stop action, and he photographed it. And that's what Edward Muybridge was famous for. And he was actually partners with George Fisk. They photographed together in Yosemite, and these are some of the views of Yosemite. Let's see. I bookmarked a couple of these special ones because it's like these are views even now that you don't see anymore because of restrictions or whatnot. You do see people up here, but not quite from this perspective. Let's see, I got a couple more in here to share with you guys. This was from his porch. And he lived there, so he got to photograph it in all seasons. He really got to make it his own. And this is, these are 4 different views of tunnel view. Once again, this is all stuff that's been done before, and I think it's just really awesome to see. You know, this book, I just got it from an old man, and he was gifted it in 1980, 9 years before I was alive. And so now I have to share it with you guys. George Fisk. So I got one more book that I'm going to share with you guys, and this video is probably being a little bit longer than I expected, but I hope you guys are enjoying it. So we'll get to that last book. Alright guys, this book. This is probably my top 3 favorite books of my entire collection, and I'm going to bore you guys with a little bit of a story, and if you're bored by it, then you're probably not going to like any of my videos after this. So, a few years back, I was looking for Hasselblad stuff on Craigslist, and I found a guy selling some. So I went to his house, and he had Hasselblad stuff, he had a Leica, he had a Linhof Technica, and he had a Brooks Very Wide. And I got to talking to this old man. He was probably in his late 60s, early 70s. And I asked him, you know, we talked for a little bit, and I wasn't interested in the Hasselblad stuff. I bought the Brooks Very Wide from him. And I said, you know, you have a lot of nice cameras here. And I meet people all the time, but I noticed there's something special about this guy's cameras. They're very, very elegant. Linhof, you know, Leica, he had an M2R, very rare, with a 35 1.4. So he spent money. He had to have made money doing this. So I asked him, what did you do with photography? Why do you have this equipment if you don't use it now? And he said, well, I was a photographer in San Francisco in the 60s, and I went to the Art Institute, and I spent time as Dorothea Lange's assistant. I helped her publish books. And I'm like, what? Like, you worked with Dorothea Lange? And he said, yeah, I was her assistant before she passed away. So my mind was absolutely blown by this. And I remained in contact with Richard. His name was Richard Conrad. And I remained in contact with him. And, you know, we spent more time together. I helped him sell some of his equipment that I couldn't afford. And he talked with me about, you know, Dorothea Lange. And, you know, that lit a huge fire inside me. I thought to myself, it was meant to be for me to meet this guy. How amazing is it that I met this person? And anyways, a year or so later, he messages me that PBS is making a documentary about her. And it's actually her granddaughter making the documentary. So I anxiously awaited a few months before it came out on PBS. And when I watched it, Richard was in the documentary. He was in the documentary with Dorothea Lange, and what he did in his life was he was about 20 years old, and he was helping Dorothea Lange go through her entire collection of negatives for the last show at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And Dorothea Lange had stomach ulcers from her lifetime, and she was getting old and she was dying. So Richard was her companion in this, and he got to go through her entire archive of images. He got to see Dorothea Lange work that nobody else has ever seen before except for her and Richard. And that shit blows my mind. So this documentary absolutely blew my mind. I've been changed since the day I watched it. And before the show opened, Dorothea Lange actually died. She died 3 months before the show opened. And that's crazy. I mean, and Richard he talked to me about Dorothea's passing, and he talked to me about how good of a friend she was to him. And he's in this documentary speaking now and in old footage, and it just blows me away, and it makes me feel very special that I even had the opportunity to meet this guy. So basically, this book is the original book from the Museum of Modern Art show in New York. And this was her lifetime collection of images. And this is amazing because this little book sums up Dorothea Lange's entire career. And there's really no other body of work like it because all of her bodies of work have had purpose. Dorothea Lange was a great documentary photographer, and she really loved photographing crisis. Anybody in crisis, she really, really was drawn to. She wanted to make people aware of other people's poor situations, I would suppose. So this book is an absolute gem for me. The fact that I found it, and this is an original print from the 60s, so that's why it's so special to me. And basically, I want to show you guys some of my favorite photos. So this photo here, this is a very simple photo. It's a boy holding flowers, but the story behind this photo is what makes it so special. This is actually her son John, and for her birthday, he picked her these flowers, and he tells a story saying that he remembers giving her the flowers, and instead of taking the flowers, she took a picture of them. And John was young, and he didn't quite understand this. Why didn't she take my flowers? Did she not like them? But what he didn't understand is that by taking a photo of these flowers, it eternalized them forever. Now this photograph of the flowers and this story that I'm telling you exists forever. This is 1931. So, by taking a photo of those flowers, she actually took that gift and she made it lifetime. She made it a forever gift, because if she would have just taken the flowers out of his hand and said thank you, we would never have this image. We would never have this in part of her body of work. And we would never have this amazing story that goes with it that I know about now. So I think that's really, really awesome because it shows you the power of just one photograph in your whole entire lifespan. She wasn't taking this photograph to put in a gallery. She wasn't taking this photograph for any reason except for the fact that it's her son giving her flowers. And what I think is really, really amazing about this picture, the most amazing part about it, is that this book was printed in the 60s, and this photo was taken in the 30s. And I heard this story in the documentary now. So that means that Dorothea chose this photo. Dorothea put this photo in the gallery, and Dorothea chose all of these things, and we're hearing about this story decades later. It's not like it's not like this is a book from the documentary and they put this picture in here to reference the story. That would make more sense. No, this is her body of work, and that's part of it, and I think that's really amazing. So we're going to move on. Here we have the ever so famous migrant mother. But I wouldn't say more importantly, but very, very important part about this is this picture here. This is an abandoned house. This is in Childress County, Texas. And this is kind of, these photos go together. Dorothea Lange had a way of doing this, that she felt that one photo could complement another photo in such a way that they both become more relevant as a result. Now, this photo is taken in California. This photo is taken in Texas. But the thing is, these photos correlate because she's a migrant mother. She's a migrant farm worker. She's a migrant farm worker because all of the tractors and all of the heavy machinery of this time were taking jobs away from the workers. So here we are. We have an abandoned farmhouse with tractor lines and nobody working in the fields. And this was the assignment that Dorothea was hired to work on. This was the story she was asked to tell, and she was telling it one picture at a time flawlessly. I mean, this photo illustrates why there were migrant workers, and then this photo illustrates what the migrant workers were going through. So, I mean, the correlation between these two, they were taken 2 years apart during the same assignment, and she knew while she was taking all of these photos that they were all going to be part of a larger body of work that would end up telling a bigger story. So I think it's important when you're trying to give value to your photographs, give them value by creating something for them to be valuable for. Here we have some more photos from that time, from the Dust Bowl era when she was working for the Farm Security Administration. Here we have one. This is one of my favorite photos. Air, this is your country. Don't let the big men take it away from you. It's just awesome. It's just a sign of the times, but you know, we still kind of hold true to those same values. I still feel the same way. It is our country. So let's see. These photos are very, very impacting because these were photos from her work at Manzanar. And her work at the Manzanar Japanese internment camp was some of the hardest work that she had to do in her life, and she believes that this is where a lot of her stomach ulcers came from, which you know, later ended up killing her. And she was asked to photograph this assignment and to show the rest of the country that it is normal business as usual at the internment camp, and it's just a Japanese summer camp for these people, and that, you know, just make it look not so bad. And Dorothea Lange didn't really feel good about that. She wanted to highlight the hardship. She wanted to show people what was happening at Manzanar. And so she kind of took to her natural course, and she began documenting the hardships and the despair. And, you know, a lot of times her photographs would not end up being seen because they weren't depicting what the government wanted her to depict. So, I think a lot of Dorothea's work was difficult, but her Manzanar work was probably the most impacting for her as far as difficult images were concerned. So let's see. Let's go to this last one. Now these last photos are really awesome because these were shot towards the way end of her life. You know, once she realized that she was dying from stomach ulcers, she decided to travel. She was going to travel the world and go make work for herself. She was not hired by anybody. She was going out as a photographer with nothing but the urge to create. So she went to a bunch of different countries in Asia and Europe, and she documented things just because she wanted to. She photographed things just because she wanted to. And see, here she is in Egypt, Venezuela, and you know, during this time that she was traveling, she did have extreme pain from these stomach ulcers. She was having difficulty. She needed her husband to help her, but she was still driven by the will to create. These were shot in 1963. I mean, these were just a few years before she passed away, and she was still making work. But this work's extra special because it was for her. It was, you know, Dorothea Lange was not asked by anybody else to make this work. It was for her, by her, and you know, I think that's really, really amazing to just see someone's lifespan in one book, and such a great photographer, such a special photographer for me. Like I said, this is one of my top 3 favorite books in my entire collection, so I had to show you guys, and I really appreciate you guys watching this video. I know it was a little bit long-winded, but I like to share my my passion for the history with people, and you guys are the best people to do it with. So I appreciate you watching, and if you liked this video, please comment below and tell me. I would love to make more. I've got a whole bookshelf full of books that I could talk about, and you know, this is kind of a spur-of-the-moment idea that I decided to film. So any positive feedback is welcomed. So until next time, thank you guys for watching so much, and keep on shooting.